Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the live stream for Simply Patiently Quietly with Charlie Rauh, a fascinating new book that we just published about a week ago, and we're very excited to be here today. I'm going to repeat myself a bunch at the beginning as everybody joins us. So thank you for coming. My name's Joey. I'm here with Charlie Rauh, the author of Simply Patiently Quietly. We're going to be talking about this book. We're going to hear some music from the book, and we'll be taking your questions as well. So thank you for being here. And I'm just going to quickly double check that the stream is working as expected. And Charlie, if you want to say hello to everybody while I do that, that would be fine.
Hello, how goes it?
Cool. Thank you all for being here. Okay, great. I've done my routine check and I'm feeling positive. So thank you all again for being here today with me, Joey Lusterman. I'm the creative director for Acoustic Guitar, and I'm here with Charlie Rauh, guitarist, composer, and now author. So Charlie, can we start? Just tell us a little bit about your background as a guitarist and composer, and then we'll get into the author bit a little bit later.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Joey. So I started playing guitar when I was about 13, and before that I had played clarinet and saxophone. As a child, I was really into jazz, that I got into from my mother watching sort of classic movies from the 30s and 40s. And as a kid, I really liked the music in those. So I started developing an interest in listening to things like Duke Ellington and Frank Sinatra and music like that, which led me to want to play it. And learn how to play it. So first I started on clarinet and then moved to saxophone, playing in school jazz bands and in a local jazz quartet. So that was my introduction to playing music. But then as I got older and my tastes started expanding, I wanted to be able to interact with the other music that I was listening to, with the pop music and the rock and things like that. Really influenced by groups like Radiohead and a lot of singer-songwriter music. So I wanted to combine all of the interest I had in guitar. My father is a wonderful guitar player, so I asked him if he would teach me. So he started teaching me how to play around the time, starting when I was 13. And I started focusing more and more on guitar because it's so all-encompassing, how you can obviously play more than one note on it, which I wasn't used to as a horn player. And it very soon took over because I realized I could play jazz and I could play pop and rock and all the other stuff that I liked. And I could start playing by myself long before I started exploring solo guitar, which is my main focus now. I just love the idea that I could sit alone in my room with a guitar and I could make songs. I could either accompany myself singing or, pick out melodies and try to figure out harmony around them. So that was how I got started with guitar. And it just started getting more and more serious. I started taking it more seriously, that I wanted to pursue it. So I studied with some local people where I was growing up in Northern Virginia, where I started playing guitar. And eventually, for a while, studied at Shenandoah Conservatory, studying jazz guitar and, going deeper into learning about theory, which I really enjoyed and still enjoy. Just the exploration of being able to explain why you like how something sounds. And that's a big part of what I love about guitar, is that you can play something and it's more than enough to just like it. You just feel that it sounds good and it makes you feel good. But I've always been really curious to want to know why I like what I like, which is what draws me to theory. So with those combined interests, I started developing more of an interest in pursuing solo guitar as a way to explore and engage, a way to sort of engage with people listening to it, and a way to explain myself that I, at the time, had a lot of trouble figuring out how to do otherwise. Solo guitar felt like a way to be communicative in a way that I hadn't figured out. So that's kind of what drew me to that. And as a guitar player, as I was exploring all of this, I wound up leaving conservatory after 2 years to pursue music professionally, which took me to Nashville. And in Nashville, I worked a series of pretty horrendous day jobs, including being a window repairman when I almost died falling through the floor of a Whole Foods that was under construction. That was,
oh my God.
And in addition to that, being a chimney sweep, that was not fun. And a lot of other bits and bobs here and there. But
Wow.
then at night I would go out and gig. And that's where I started developing an interest in pursuing sideman work, because I was trying to figure out, well, how do I stop, fixing windows and sweeping chimneys? Maybe I can make money at this. So I started using the guitar to sort of explore that, and that led to playing as a sideman for singer-songwriters and groups around Nashville, eventually catching attention from some local producers who had started inviting me to do studio work. So that's where I got my first, sort of entry-level studio work, being given opportunities by really generous and kind musicians in Nashville who were also A-listers. Some wonderful people like Jim Riley, notably, the first producer and still a great friend of mine, who gave me my first chance to work in a studio. And then using the guitar now to move more into the professional realm, I started taking studio work and sideman work more seriously, but also really wanted to pursue somehow my own music. And I started applying for residencies to compose and to, try to get funding for developing a style. And the first one would lead to me leaving Nashville, being accepted to the Cloistered Foundation in East Iceland, outside of Egilstaðir. So I went to stay at this house, Skriðukloister, which was the home of Gunnar Gunnarsson, who was actually an Icelandic author who willed his house to be an artist residency. And I went there with choreographer Megan Harrell to combine my music and her choreography, influenced by the writing of Hildegard von Bingen. We had this project where we were trying to translate the writing into movement and music. And that was my first big opportunity to be paid to do my own music. And so hopping off the sideman and studio stuff, I was like, oh man, I like this even more. I want to be paid more to do my own music. So that kind of led, after that residency, I was like, I'm not going back to Nashville. So Megan and I both actually decided, let's both just move to New York. Let's see what happens. And that was 15 years ago. So in New York, I decided only to focus on teaching, trying to be, get sideman and session work, and then developing my own music. And that's what I've been doing ever since I got here, which eventually led to the acoustic guitar. Because interestingly, I was predominantly an electric player until about sort of the middle of 2017. I started taking an interest in paring down and getting a little bit more distilled. And I was really attracted to the idea of acoustic guitar, but I didn't feel like I connected with it actually until I played a Waterloo guitar, which was my introduction to Collings, who I am an artist endorser for now and play pretty much exclusively. Most of my work is on the two Collings guitars that I have. The one I'm going to play later, the Baby One MH, and then my Parlor one with a Sitka top and mahogany sides and back. And what I liked about switching to acoustic was sort of the minimal nature of it really leans into what you bring to it. I know Julian Lodge is famous for saying this in an interview, where you have to show up, and if you show up, the guitar will show up. And that started becoming more and more appealing to me because it pushed me not only to be better technically, but better conceptually. I had to really mean it. I had to be in touch with the intention of what I was doing on the acoustic guitar. It wasn't going to, do me any favors. It's a pretty unforgiving instrument to play unless you're really ready to do it. And for me, that's really appealing. I feel like it keeps me honest. So that's what drew me to not only in my solo work, but also as a sideman and session player. I prefer playing acoustic now. It just feels more real to me. Not that I don't still play electric, but acoustic guitar really gave me a voice, I feel like, with the way that I want to sound. It sounds like what's in my head in a way that electric guitar never has. So that's what brings me to where I am right now.
Great. Going back a little bit to that residency you mentioned, you were working with interpreting the work of an author, which has become kind of something you do a lot, right? How do you pick these authors that you work with, or what's the kind of impetus behind this literature inspired composition work?
Well, with Hildegard von Bingen, she was when I learned about her in conservatory. This actually had a big part of why I left. I was really fascinated with everything about her, about the music that we heard that she composed, and on my own, I started looking more into her writing and her life and her history, and I was really into that. But in the context that I was learning about her at the time, it was more, sort of a wide and shallow pool of music history. We're going over all these composers. And I was like, wait, I want to know more about that. I want to know more about like this woman in the 12th century who had visions that told her to write music and plays and write this beautiful literature. So I decided that, there were things that I needed to do, and I wasn't going to be able to do them unless I went and did them. It was kind of like a do this or don't do this kind of thing. And she had a big part for me in starting to feel that way. So she was kind of the first writer that I interacted with that made me want to make music sort of symbiotically with literature. And at that point, I wasn't writing, but I wanted to make music that did what her writing did, if that makes any sense. So initially, before I started composing music inspired by literature, I took a way more technical approach to it. I used to have this process that I would use and this is what I was doing in Iceland at the residency for the dance music. I had this process where I would actually take the written work, in this case, Hildegard's work, and I would count the letters between each letter of each word to get a series of numbers. And I would use the numbers to make intervals to make the melody. And I would take that melody and then I would harmonize it subjectively, just the way that I felt sounded cool. But because the melody was coming out of this series of numbers based on intervals in the alphabet, it wasn't exactly atonal music because I was harmonizing it so I could make sense of it. I could make it as atonal or as consonant as I wanted it to be. But what I liked about it was I really enjoyed the idea of something being outside of myself that I'm interacting with. It made me feel connected to the writing. It made me feel connected as a musician. And that music was obviously very abstract. But it was a good start for me, for younger me, to get this idea in my head of I needed to be disciplined. If I wanted to interpret the intention of literature, I needed to establish this sort of codified discipline to actually do it and not just say I'm doing it, not just phone it in. So that practice of technicality, I think, was really good developmentally, even though it didn't prove to be something I was interested in developing in the long term. What it did was it led to me taking intention seriously, which is where I am currently and what I'm diving deeper and deeper into. So the way that I select this literature is the way anyone would. I like to read a wide variety of things, a fair amount of nonfiction, historical literature, short stories, poetry, for the most part. Not as I haven't figured out a way to connect to fiction yet, but I'm working on it. But the way that I select it, with the writers that I do like to work with, like Anne Morrow Lindbergh or Anne Carson or Anne and Emily Bronte, I just, find my way to different authors and I connect or I don't connect. But when I do, I have this idea that I want to translate what I think they meant into music. So if their writing was music, what would it sound like? And that's how I've gone about making albums, like my album The Bluebell, which is a solo guitar album inspired by Anne and Emily Bronte poems, or Angels of Annunciation, about Anne Morrow Lindbergh's memoirs as well as her poems, or A Hymn to the Morning, which is inspired by Phyllis Wheatley's poems. All of those are less technical and more interpretive. I think of it the way that you would translate a written work from one language to another, except in this case, the language is music, which is that's the approach that I take to it. Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff. All right, we just had a kind of a little spike in numbers here, so a bunch of people just joined us. So I'm going to welcome them and tell them why we're here. We're talking to Charlie Rauh, the author of Simply Patiently Quietly, as you can see here, which is an approach to creating intentional music. So it's a good time, I think, to kind of switch over to focusing on the book, Charlie. So I just want to know a little bit about what was the spark for writing these essays? How did they come together? Why did you want to make this book?
Well, interestingly, I had been talking to Adam Perlmutter, who he had approached me earlier with an idea because I had written a couple of articles for the magazine already for what we're talking about, ways to approach creativity inspired by literature into solo guitar. And Adam had this idea of making a songbook of a lot of those pieces. He asked me if I'd be interested in that. So we were already kind of talking about that, but that kind of evolved after I started writing the essays. So I'll come back to that in a second and talk about why I wrote the essays. They mostly came as an idea in early 2024, which was a really specific time for me because in 2023 I had a really busy year, a lot of traveling. It was great, but it was also very exhausting. I had a tour in Japan and Korea, directly followed by my residency with Louisiana State University's veterinary school, and we'll talk about that later too, where I was composing music for animals in the hospital. So all these, that on top of my regular teaching, session work, and gigging, it was an amazing year, one of my favorite years of my life so far. But things came to a really interesting close when I was, feeling a little burned out. So at the end of the year, I cleared my calendar for pretty much the second half of December. I really needed a break. I was kind of on the edge. So that didn't happen because the day after my teaching for the year ended, I was sitting in my room, watching a movie, drinking a bottle of wine. And I was like, man, what's that smell? I turned my head to the right and there's black smoke just like filling my room up from the floor. So I, called 911, freaked out, grabbed as much as I could with two hands and ran out. And what had happened was the apartment below me had caught on fire. And
God.
So they got there quick and they did their job. But in doing their job, because I made the call and I said my apartment number, they kicked my door down and completely destroyed my apartment to put the fire out that was under me, which they would have had to do anyway, because the one under me was a basement apartment. But they broke out all the windows to let the smoke out, and then they broke through the floor to use the hoses to put the fire out beneath my apartment. Now, luckily, I was really blessed in the way that my apartment just got smoked, basically, but they got the fire out, so I didn't lose any of my valuables. Other than some things that got smoke damage that I had to replace, but nothing horrible. But the effect of that, for anyone who doesn't live in New York City, if you're all of a sudden homeless, it's very stressful. This is a very expensive city. And if you have no time, I didn't have time to get a storage unit or anything. So my stuff was just kind of sitting there. And I am further blessed to have an amazing community around me of people who helped me out. And a friend gave me a place to stay for a week while I figured out what to do. But it was really stressful because for us, for about 2 weeks, I had no clue. I had never experienced that type of uncertainty before. I didn't know what I was going to do. Mm-hmm. And it changed everything about the way that my brain works, basically. I started thinking in a completely different way. During that time, I was, for a while, I was hopping from hotel to hotel, taking Ubers everywhere, spending an obscene amount of money that I didn't really plan on spending, with as many bags as I could carry. It was an experience that, really put things into perspective, where a lot of people assume, oh, well, what you always hear, well, that's not going to happen to me. I've got it together. That only happens to those people. When it happens to you, it's a vibe. And going through that and eventually finding a new place to live. When I got into the new place, for the first time, literally in my life, I no longer felt that I needed to take a guitar with me everywhere. And I always felt that way. If I went back to visit family, went on a vacation, whatever, it was like, well, I got to bring a guitar, I got to practice. And that was
Mhm.
somehow just deleted from my mind. Um, Not because music was less important, but for whatever reason, that really flipped things. And then I started writing down why, which is what led to those essays, Simply, Patiently, Quietly. I started thinking about essence. I started thinking about foundation. I started thinking about what happens when you strip everything back. What's left? Um, what's left, and what's the reason? Like I was always thinking about what I needed to do, and I don't think I was thinking enough about why I needed to do it, if that makes any sense.
Definitely.
So yeah, so that was sort of why I started writing these essays, and I was just kind of writing. I didn't know, again, I didn't have any plan to do anything with them. I didn't even put together that they could be part of something or that anyone would ever see them. I first showed them to my sister, Christina, who wound up doing the illustrations that we'll talk more about later. And my sister is a brilliant writer and artist, and I just wanted her feedback on what she thought about it. And she was very encouraging, and said that she thought it was worth really considering, exposing, sharing it. um, so that's when I got the idea to make this book, to approach Adam and say, well, what if we combine these essays with the songbook, and what if my sister illustrates it, and we make it sort of a book, not just a songbook, but something that's a little multifaceted, that combines everything that I've been working on in a way that hopefully engages people who are musicians and non-musicians, people who might just be curious to get a different perspective, or in addition to people who want new guitar music. But I wanted to try to make something that encompasses all of that, all of the work that I've been doing with the music I've been composing over the past 20 years, but also this new perspective that I gained, um, that I feel like is changing the way that I approach the music that I'm working on now. So that was basically the idea for why this book exists.
Great. I had no idea about that crisis
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was, so glad you
it,
made it through and something good came
yeah.
out of it.
It actually it took me a while to figure out that led to writing the essays. I didn't even really realize it until I thought about it these past couple of months, a year
Uh-huh.
later. So, but yeah, that's definitely why. Yeah.
Cool. Well, not cool, but
Yeah.
um, you know what I mean. Now seems like a good time to maybe read a bit from the book if you're up for that.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So
Let's see.
So we'll do a little reading, everybody, and then Charlie's going to play some of the pieces from the book as well. And if you have any questions, of course, you can put them in the chat and we can address them. But thank you for tuning in. And yeah, Charlie, if you want to read now, I'm going to disappear myself for a bit.
Gotcha. So yeah, I'll read a couple of excerpts. There's 3 essays, and each essay is named after one of the title words. So Simply, Patiently, and Quietly. And I'll start off with an excerpt from the Simply essay. A few years ago, while on tour, I was conceptualizing the music that would become the Bluebell, my lullaby cycle inspired by the poems of Anne and Emily Bronte. I was in the Portland, Oregon airport after a run of solo performances when I was struck with an idea. I had wanted to compose a lullaby inspired by Anne's poem, The Doubter's Prayer, a gorgeous piece expressing the vulnerable side of determination. Through her signature use of delicate yet fierce articulation, she painfully describes how, in making every effort to be the best that she can be, she consistently feels that she's falling short. I had been reading this poem a lot at the time and finally felt that I could translate it into music. So I found a remote space in the terminal and took my guitar out of its case. Crouched in the corner, I played the melody that had been materializing in my thoughts and made a voice memo recording so I wouldn't forget it. But when I listened back to the recording, my heart sank. It was a poor effort, a forgettable and weak attempt to musically translate the intention of a brilliant sentiment from a brilliant mind. Defeated, I began to put my instrument away when I looked up and was startled to see a little girl standing in front of me. As soon as she had my attention after who knows how long, she calmly said, "I like your song." After her gentle message was delivered, she scurried off back to her smiling parents, and I was left to process a very important lesson. The genuine intention behind creating contains more power than any amount of technical training. To discard an idea because it lacks the sophistication that we are either trained or choose to chase is certainly a mistake. To be simple, to be unadorned, to be vulnerable, to be open, these are qualities worth chasing. It is in these states of creativity that we find true engagement with listeners. The lullaby that I was ready to forget forever would become, though weak yet longing to believe, named after a line in Anne's poem and epitomizing the power of simplicity. Power and powerlessness, strength and weakness, victory and surrender. And this is an excerpt from the second essay from Patiently. I had the honor of accepting an invitation to be composer in residence at Louisiana State University School of Veterinary Medicine in the summer of 2023, and I had the greater honor of being educated on what hopeful patience entails through working with the practitioners there. Patience is treating a falcon with atrophied talons. Patience is treating and rehabilitating an eagle with a broken wing. Patience is stepping into the role of fixing a creature that would kill you. Patience is the hope that this is the only way. Patience is the decision to lay down your defenses in favor of building the defenses of another. To wait is to truly understand other creatures. In waiting, you have no power. In the sacrifice of any perceived power, you gain clarity. You gain the clarification that you never actually had power to begin with. In this reduction, you're ready to be molded, you are ready to receive hope, and you are equipped to be still. Inspired by what I witnessed and engaged in at LSU VetMed, I was able to explore these concepts musically, seeking to create wellness-oriented music aimed at serving animals and humans alike. One notable example of this was during an osteopathy session with an elderly dog. Through the practitioner's gently paced and meticulously detailed bodywork applied to the animal, it was a true marvel to witness human patience transferring as animal trust. I began playing some of the solo acoustic guitar music that I had been working on during the session when a wonderful gesture from the patient materialized. At a break in the treatment, the dog slowly made its way across the room to where I was sitting and gently placed the top of her head against the body of my instrument as I played. It was a wonderful show of the healing that can occur through patience and intention. And one more excerpt from the third essay from Quietly. The quiet requires one main virtue, and that is to listen well. Distraction has no place in the quiet realm, and to enter it requires respect. To create quiet music is to demand the same of the listener as yourself, to be still. It is true that this can result in being ignored or missed completely, but it's also true that it clearly establishes intent. Those who are looking for intention will not miss or ignore it. As a solo guitar composer, I enjoy using the concept of the lullaby as a musical model. A lullaby is familiar yet curious. It's a musical form designed to bring open-ended wonder to the listener, a gentle, spacious, and tuneful calming. Naturally, we associate lullabies with babies. We associate the lullaby with an endearing, sweet melody used to lull little ones to sleep or to bring them joy. I'd like to extrapolate on the idea that the lullaby form is not as limited as the common understanding defines it. In quiet moments of melody, we may experience a whirlwind of thoughts, emotions, and memories. We may be still even just for a short while and allow ourselves to dream. We may leave all our distractions behind and be elastically molded in our contemplation. Lullabies are often brief and appeal wonderfully to early ages who rejoice in repetition as they discover something brand new every time they listen. Why do we lose that sense of awe with age? Why do we become frustrated with repetition instead of being joyfully curious to see what will happen the next time around? I believe it's still there. The curiosity, the joy, the wonder. Perhaps it's just dormant. I enjoy composing quiet lullabies for all listeners, from babies to adults to animals, because it's music I believe we all need. We all need to be still, to wonder, to be undistracted for a while, and to enjoy the quiet. We need to confront what quietude demands. We need to embrace what quietude gifts us.
All right. Thank you for sharing that stuff. It's so great. The idea of, fostering creativity obviously applies to guitarists, but there's a lot in there for, anybody, whether they're a composer or play a different instrument or an artist visually. I think there's a lot to be gained from reading these essays. I know when I was laying the book out, I was reading them over and over again, and it really helped kind of like get in the groove and making sure approaching things in a way that was simple and intentional. And I think that really helped.
Oh yeah, and you did a beautiful job. As I've told you, I can never tell you enough times, but I really, really love the way that you worked on the book and all of the formatting and layout and all the work you put into it. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. I'm super curious though about your vet residency and how that can you tell me a little bit more about how that came about and kind of what you've gained from playing for the animals?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that came about is I regularly work with a wonderful poet who's become a mentor and a great friend to me, Cornelius Eady. And I was accompanying him. He's also a wonderful songwriter, and that was the capacity I was with him in this instance. He was playing at a festival called the Festival of Words in Grand Coteau, Louisiana, and I was there as his guitarist. And we did a workshop, a poetry workshop that I sort of peripherally assisted him in as he was leading it. And I mentioned in that I like working with literature. I like translating intention with music. And from that, I met a woman named Sandy Sarr. At the time, I didn't know that Sandy worked at LSU in the veterinary school, but we just had a conversation. This was in 2018, I believe. We just had a conversation about literature and intention, and really enjoyed talking to each other, stayed in touch. And then years later, I heard back from Sandy, and she called me to ask me if I'd be interested in applying this method of translation of intent, but instead of using literature, use wellness. And I wasn't exactly sure what that meant, but I said yes because it sounded really cool. So we just kept having, more and more conversations about this. And her idea, she had this wonderful idea of starting an artist residency at the veterinary school, which to my knowledge is the first one that's ever existed. I've never heard of that before. I've tried to research and find more. And I think this might be Sandy's original idea that hadn't been approached before. Before me, there was a wonderful visual artist, Shelby Prindeville, at LSU, and I was the first musician to be invited. So the idea that Sandy had was take this idea of the sort of understated, gentle lullaby form of music and this idea of translating intention, but translate the intention in the environment of the veterinary school with the doctors and the animals alike. So sort of an interspecies music that's designed to be engaging for both, not just for animals, not just for humans, but somehow try to get right in the middle, which was a pretty tall order. But again, I thought it sounded cool. So I was like, well, this might fail miserably, but I'll try. So that's what we did. We spent a little over a month, and Sandy was really brilliant in the way that she executed it. Her idea to get started was she just took me around to meet all these amazing people at LSU Vet Med, just to have conversations, so I could hear what they do, so they could ask me questions and I could ask them. And by doing that, Sandy sort of embedded me in the culture of the environment. So I wasn't a tourist. I wasn't someone just walking around, getting in their way. And I feel like her decision to do that made all the difference in the world of why it became very successful, because Sandy understood that I needed to earn these people's trust in the same way that they need to earn the animals' trust to heal them. It was very full circle in the way that we approached it. It was very much rooted in empathy and care. And that's what the music needed to get across, because at the end of the day, empathy is what all living things require. It can't be left out. It's the most important thing. It's what defines any relationship, whether it's animal to animal, interspecies, regardless. And we started becoming increasingly aware of that. And the more conversations we had, the more we knew that needed to be at the center of this. So after that, we started, got an idea of, I got an idea of the layout of the hospital, and they gave me an office to be centralized at, and distributed, my cell phone number. So if doctors wanted me to come by, they could just text me and say, like, hey, do you want to come check out this patient? So that's what we did for about a month and a half. I just observed these doctors and these animals. And first I just observed, and I would go back to where I was staying and compose. Then I started bringing the music into sessions, and that's when we started seeing the animals react. So like I said, in that passage that I read, there was the one time, the dog's name was Pilgrim, actually, who came over and put her head on the guitar, which was really nice. But there's another, also in the book I talk about this, but there was another situation with, I think she's a German Shepherd. Her name was Reika. But Reika was in a lot of pain and very agitated. And an agitated German Shepherd is very scary. That's not something you really want to be around. And the doctors were having a tough time with her. She wasn't a violent or aggressive natured dog, but she was very visibly in physical discomfort. She was having none of it. They were trying to give her a shot to relax her so they could do acupuncture to work on her joint issues. And anytime the needle was even close, she would jump away. So I got a text to come down, and they're like, well, if you want to try that music thing, this is a doozy. Let's see what happens, So, I came down. At first I just watched. I wanted to see what I was getting into here. And I was actually really nervous because I had no idea what was going to happen. But, the doctors were, trying to just settle her down, and Reiko, again, was just not having it. So they left for a while, and I sat down and I started playing the music that is on Theoria on the album. That's the collection of these lullabies composed at LSU. But I started playing the earlier versions of that music when I was working on it. And it was pretty crazy. I mean, the dog started, she was walking around in circles, and eventually she stopped, she sat down, she laid down, and then she went to sleep. So then the doctors came back in and woke her up, and were able to give her the shots and, dozens of acupuncture needles with no problems. And I was very, clear when I wrote this in the book. I don't think the music really had anything to do. The music doesn't take credit for that happening specifically, according to my observation. What I do think the music did was it seemed to create an atmospheric effect that Reika had no idea that she was being helped, and then she did. So I feel like when she went down to sleep and then they woke her up, it wasn't, the music didn't do some kind of magical healing trick. Right. I think what I think, and I'm not a scientist, and I have no way to prove any of this, but like what I think music does and what I observed, and it's an ongoing conversation with the researchers and the doctors at LSU Vet Med that I still have with them. What I think it does is that it helps communicate that healing is happening. It doesn't do the healing. It clarifies that it exists. And I feel like especially with animals, when you can't directly communicate with them, it's not that different than dealing with a toddler getting a tetanus shot or something. They don't know that they need that shot to survive. All they know is someone that they trust took them to this weird room, and then someone they don't know shoved a piece of metal into them. So in their minds, they're just being utterly betrayed. But I think that reaction, I think the music, for some reason, the music seemed to have an effect that clarified, oh, wait, these people are actually helping. So the healing is all due to the doctors who know what they're doing, who know how to lay hands on these animals and calm them down. They do all of that. The music has nothing to do with that, in my opinion. What I think the music does is it gives the doctors an environmental aspect that isn't there, that clarifies to an animal that help is being done, that healing is occurring when they might not be aware of it otherwise. So that was the experience I had with it. And from that, Sandy also had this other amazing idea, which was another challenge for me, that pushed me into new territory. But she asked me if I wanted to write music for the choir, for the LSU choir. Because Alyssa Rowe, the director, had expressed interest in being part of the residency. And again, I was like, yeah, I'd love to. And I've never done that before. I have no idea how to write vocal music. I don't know about ranges. I don't know anything. So I just said yes because it sounded cool. And then immediately I was like, oh, damn it. Like, this is going to be so embarrassing. Like, these are like actual singers and I have no idea what I'm doing. So I talked to some composers I know who write for vocal music and got an idea of vocal ranges. And I gave it a shot. And it wound up actually going really well. And the singers were fantastic. They handled everything. They gave me pointers when I was, like, I was very open with them that I hadn't done it before, because I didn't want to look like an idiot. So the singers were really kind. Alyssa was fantastic. And they kind of helped me, deliver my ideas in ways that were workable. So on Theoria, it's the first time I've composed choir music, and we recorded it in one of the churches on campus. It sounds beautiful. They did an amazing job, got everything pretty much in the first take. We did 2 or 3 of each, but I kept the first one because they were always better. So on Theoria, it's a combination of this solo guitar music and the 6-piece choir. And it's been really fun because after that album came out, friends of mine and people who heard, we did some radio interviews, and people who heard about it found the music on Spotify and tried playing it for their pets. And it's really nice to hear, just reactions from various animals and people. So it wound up being a really challenging, but a really life-giving situation. And again, all of this is due to, Sandy Sarr having these ideas and like handing me these challenges, and the two of us being up for seeing what happens and finding the wonderful doctors that we still work with, like Kylan Scott in the integrative medicine team. We worked together a lot when I was there. Everyone was just up for it. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Everyone believed in the concept. So it wound up being one of the most, pivotal moments in my life, really.
Nice. There's a lesson in there to say yes to things, even if you don't know how to do them yet.
I was about to say trial by fire, but given my last previous story, maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't need any more of those.
Cool. Well, if you're up for it, Charlie, if you could grab your guitar and maybe share a couple of the songs from the book and tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'll play a few. I'll start off with playing "The Weak Yet Longing to Believe," the song I was playing in the Portland airport that I talked about in the essay, that I, was feeling really insecure about, and that random little girl convinced me to keep. But I'll start with that one, and I'll sort of like string it into some of the other ones, which is what I want to use to illustrate a point. When Adam and I were getting these transcriptions together, and Adam Perlmutter did a fantastic job transcribing 32 of my original pieces in this book, and just absolutely crushed it. Maintained all of the character and the fingerings and the voicings that I wanted to use, and delivered it in a very approachable way. Regardless of level, a lot of these songs are very easy to play. They have chord chart markings to play along with. The choral music is also in there for singers, or a lot of it is friendly for piano as well, because it's very simple, it's very plain, and you can sort of organize the notes in ways. And all of that is due to Adam Perlmutter's masterful transcriptions of this music. So grateful to him for that. Shout out to Adam wherever you are. But the reason I wanted to play, I'll play a few of them and sort of string them together using space and improvisation, is because there's also a note in the book about this. I didn't want to notate any dynamic markings or tempo markings or anything like that in there, because I really like the idea of anyone who wants to play these, you can bring yourself in that way. I've written the music, I've written the harmony and the melody, the structure of these songs, but they're not meant to be played the way that I play them necessarily. They're meant to be lived into. This is the whole point of this book, is to be approachable, to be engaging, to be communicative. It's not about taking what I do and doing it. It's about me sharing ideas and you taking those ideas and seeing what happens when you engage with them. Um, so something I like to do, I just did a performance last night, doing some reading and playing some of the music. And that's what I'm about to do now with the way that I approach playing. I like to, make transitions between them because they're very short. They usually take about a minute, minute and a half. Sometimes I'll improvise a little segue. Maybe I'll improvise an intro. Maybe I'll, change the phrasing a little bit. So they're still the songs, but they live in the moment. And that's the way that I would like people to enjoy them. So I'll start off with The Weak Yet Longing to Believe, and then I'll move into some of the music on Theoria, the music from LSU. And all of the music from Theoria, the music for the Animal Hospital, that's actually the only complete album that's included here in the songbook. So all 13 of those lullabies for choir and guitar are in there. So I'll start with The Weak Yet Longing to Believe, which is on the Bluebell, and then play some music transitioning from Theoria. And there's also a discography in the book, and all of the music is available from Destiny Records on all streaming platforms. If you want to hear what they sound like and try to play along. So thanks again. Thanks again for being here. And thanks, Joey, for having me. Thanks to String Letter Publishing for making this book happen. And thank you to my sister, Christina, for the wonderful illustrations, and to Adam Perlmutter for doing these engravings of the songs. So thanks again, guys. And now I'll play a little bit of the lullabies for you. Thank you.
All right. That sounded really nice. Thank you for playing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Everybody is clapping their hands violently in their homes, but we can't hear it. That was really nice. We are coming up towards the end of it, so I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. And there's one thing we didn't quite get to, which is unfortunate, but I'm going to bring it up now, which is your sister's illustrations that are throughout the book. There's an illustration section, and then there's some that are related to the essays. And Charlie, were these, do you know, I know she's not here to answer this, but were these drawn specifically for this book or for these essays from the music, or were these existing drawings?
Yeah, so my sister, Christina Rauh Fishburne, who's also an author and an artist who works with, so she collaborates with people all over the world, either illustrating or writing. With these illustrations, I gave her the first draft of the essays and just told her she could do whatever she wanted. And most of these, actually, I think all of them are just drawings that she made that to her epitomize simplicity, patience, and quietude, taking images from her own life, taking photographs of places she's lived, members of her family, her children. There's a picture of a horse that lived on a farm near where she used to live in England that they used to walk by, named Guinness. So Guinness is featured in the book. And yeah, Christina just really took the message that I was trying to convey in the essays and then, took from her own life to interpret that visually. And we agreed on the medium of using pen and ink to keep everything black and white, to keep it very understated and simple. And a lot of her work, she's done several of the album covers for the music as well that are also featured in the book. And again, she's worked with a lot of other authors and other musicians in England and Iceland, around the US. So you should definitely look up her work, Christina Rauh Fishburne, on her website. You can find a lot of really mind-blowing work that she's done, both literary and artistic. But in this book, yeah, they're all specifically made. Nothing was pre-existing. Some of them were taken from photos that she made into sketches. But they're all specific to these essays and also to the music. Yeah,
that's what I thought. But then when I was preparing for this, I was like wondering, did I just make that up? I'm glad to hear that's the truth. Yeah. So everybody, the book is available from Charlie. It's on store.acousticguitar.com. You can get copies there. It's really great. I can't recommend it highly enough. If anybody has any last minute questions or comments, you can pop them in the chat. We've got one here. Love Mr. Rauh's music. Thank you for sharing that. But thanks everybody for tuning in. And Charlie, thanks for taking the time. And thanks for putting this book together. It's been a lot of fun working on, and people have been responding to it well. I know people are enjoying it. So
Yeah,
if
thanks so
you're one
much,
of those
Joey.
people, let us know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
and
thanks.
one thing
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you have the book and you're playing the songs, send your versions to Charlie and us. We want to hear what you do with the music.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks everyone for joining, and thank you, Joey. Thanks for all your work and for getting this together.
All right, so that's it for today. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you soon. End stream.